Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sabrina Hervey. I am a senior education specialist with Educated Child, a global program of the Education Above All Foundation. And I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. This is the second webinar in our four-part series on keeping children learning during the COVID-19 pandemic response and restrictions. Just for those of you who may not be so familiar with Education Above All, I would like to start off by giving you a little bit of background about the foundation and our programs. Education Above All is a foundation founded in 2012 by Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser. It is located in Doha, Qatar, or based in Doha, Qatar, but works globally. Its aim is to contribute to human, social, and economic development through the provision of quality education, with a particular focus on those affected by poverty, conflict, and disaster. It champions the needs of children, youth, and women to empower them to become active members of their communities. EAA works to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for vulnerable and marginalized people, especially in the developing world, as an enabler of human development. We are proud to work with global, national, regional, and local partners to implement proven and innovative interventions in education, to protect the right to education wherever it is under threat, to advocate to draw international attention to critical education issues, and to collaborate with leading global organizations to resolve education-related challenges. We are united by a shared belief that education is the key to progress and prosperity. Education Above All is made up of 4 global programs. These include Alpha Hura, Peace, or Protecting Education in Insecurity and Conflict, Rota, Reach Out to Asia, and the host of today's webinar, Educated Child, or EAC. EAC aims to significantly reduce the number of children worldwide who are denied their right to education. We work with partner organizations in order to trigger significant breakthroughs in providing out-of-school children faced with extreme poverty, cultural barriers, and conflict-affected environments an opportunity for a full course of quality primary education. Prior to the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, there were an estimated 64 million children around the world that were out of school. It's EAC's mission to try and reduce significantly the number of children out of school at the primary school level. After the restrictions put in place due to COVID-19, the world has seen these numbers increase significantly as schools have closed down, and many of the most marginalized are likely not to return if something is not done to keep them learning and to get them back into school systems and learning opportunities wherever possible. Today, EAC is proud to have 3 of its partners join us to discuss just that, how their organizations, programs, and projects have been working diligently on the ground and globally in order to organize, mobilize communities and community members to keep children learning during this time. We are joined today by buildOn, Roseanne Jagger and Jibril Ouattara, the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Program Officer from buildOn, will talk about the work that they're doing both globally and in the country, on the country level. Lisa Rodrigues from Educate Girls in India will join us to discuss how Educate Girls mobilizes community members to ensure continuity of learning. And then we are rounded off by Chikandi Mpokosa from our partner in Nigeria, UNICEF. So without further ado, I'm going to start this off. We'll have buildOn start with a presentation, and then we're going to have, once all 3 of our partners have given you a brief overview of the work that they're doing, we will have a nice moderated discussion to go in depth about some of their work and their approaches. We'll open up the floor to you, the audience, to raise questions. You can post questions at any time using the chat function of the webinar panel if you would like, when we can pose those during the moderated discussion, or when I open it up to the audience, you can also raise your hand and our tech guru, Ryan, will unmute you and you can ask an oral question of the panelists. So if I could please ask Roseanne and Jabril to join us on the screen and to unmute and tell us a little bit about what buildOn is doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sabrina. Before I start, I just want to say how honored Jabril and I are both to be a partner of EAA and also to be amongst this group of global leaders in education. So for those of you who don't already know, buildOn is a nonprofit organization, and we're working in the United States along with 8 developing countries globally. Those include Burkina Faso, Guatemala, Haiti, Malawi, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Senegal. And our mission is to break the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations, and we do that through service and education. So in partnership with EAA and EAC, buildOn has worked with community members to enroll more than 50,000 out-of-school children in our 6 partner countries. And that's something we're really proud of doing together. On the next slide, before we talk about our global work, I just wanted to touch briefly on what we are doing here in the United States. So in the United States, we have a service learning program in high schools that empower young people from America's most challenging neighborhoods, and they explore the challenges that they face in their own communities, and they're taking action to address those issues. And they do that through doing service. They're helping people who are experiencing homelessness, seniors, and also children in their communities. And our youth in the United States have contributed more than 2.3 million hours of service to make real change in their own communities and to develop as young people. And I know you can move on to the next slide. I know we're here to talk about education globally and not the United States. So it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to Jabril Ouattara. As you mentioned, Sabrina, he is our Chief Program Officer for our global programs.
Thanks, Roseanne, and hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be in this panel with you to share about our work at buildOn. In developing countries, buildOn work with rural communities to build schools, to increase access and elevate the quality of education, and also to participate in literacy programs and engage in income generating programs. The community members also take the lead in the strategies to enroll out-of-school children. In the school building program, community members have contributed over 3 million volunteer work days to build more than 1,700 schools in our partners' countries that Roseanne listed earlier. Next slide, please. To date, more than 230,000 children, parents, and grandparents are attending buildOn schools. And this includes the primary school and middle school students, but also the participants of our adult literacy program who learn literacy and numeracy skills and perform income generating activities to break the cycle of poverty in their communities. Next slide, please. As Roseanne mentioned, buildOn partnered with EAA, EAC to enroll thousands of our school children in school. And this partnership already gave us the opportunity to engage partner communities to remove the barriers to education and enable more than 55,000 our school children. And those are enrolled in school across 6 countries. On the right side, this girl is one of the out-of-school children enrolled in Mali in 2017. And on the left-hand side, the name of the boy is Jerno, is from the village of Jajatok in Senegal. buildOn built a school in his community in 2016, and Cherno was one of the out-of-school children identified by our team, and they had dropped out of school 2 years before. Our team conducted sensitization activities in the village and started the adult literacy program. And Cherno's parents, who you can see with him in this picture, were both involved in the adult literacy program. And through those activities, Cherno went back in school and currently is one of the best students of his school. And he should normally complete the primary school cycle next year. Next slide, please. Now, let's put some focus on our response to COVID-19. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, buildOn kept working in solidarity with community members to build the preparedness and also to build more classrooms. Our team organized sensitization sessions with communities in rural area in small groups to make sure that social distancing is observed. And our team have been sharing the key information about COVID-19 and the necessary precautions to take, such as social distancing and washing and masks. We also reviewed our processes to reorganize the site visits, the covenant signing processes with community members, as well as the work on the construction site to ensure social distancing. In addition to this, we made sure that there are hand washing stations on the construction site, and we ensured that community volunteers wear masks. And our mask project has been very helpful. So most of the community members have masks to protect themselves. And on this slide, I will share a bit about our mask project. We were able to work with community members to make more than 42,000 face masks. And because community's contribution is key for us, we did not just purchase masks to distribute to communities, but we made the mask with the community members. We provided some fabrics and the necessary materials to make the mask. We trained community tailors to make the mask, and the community members and our buildOn team have been supporting by cutting the fabric and helping the community tailors to make the mask. And by working with communities in this process, we ensure that they are committed, that they understand the importance of the mask, but also this helps build local knowledge and skills in terms of making masks in our rural communities. And as the schools reopen in many of our countries now, the masks that we produced already are being used by parents, students, and teachers. So that's what we wanted to briefly share with you. And thanks everyone for kind attention, and looking forward to covering some more details in the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Jibril and Roseanne. It's very informative, and it's very interesting to see how you've been working with the communities and adapting your approaches to this new reality that we're living in, but still continuing to be able to move forward with the construction work and the other aspects of your programmatic work. I'd now like to ask Lisa Rodrigues from our partner Educated Girls in India to join us and to talk to us about the very interesting work that Educated Girls does through, I always mess up the pronunciation of the team, so forgive me, but their Team Balaka's approach and the other approaches that they use that work with the community members. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Rodrigues, and I lead the operations at Educate Girls. Over the next few slides, I would love to share with you about how we as a nonprofit have stayed agile and able to respond to the needs of our communities in the depths of the COVID-19 crisis. And we were able to do this by leveraging our community-based volunteers, influencers, and government to keep our girls learning. Next slide, please. Educate Girls is a nonprofit in India that focuses primarily on mobilizing communities for girls' education in India's most rural and educationally unprivileged areas. Working in partnership with the government, we currently operate in over 18,000 villages in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh in India. Our model engages a huge base of community volunteers called Team Balikas. And with the support of these volunteers, as you see on the left-hand side top picture, we identify out-of-school girls through an intensive door-to-door survey in which we geotag each and every household in a village that we work in. Once these out-of-school children are identified, we facilitate enrollment of these girls, as you see in the top right picture. And enrollment really isn't the end goal. It is critical to mobilize the community and ensure we build champions for girls' education through community-based meetings, as seen in the picture on the bottom left. We also mobilize school management committees, which are primarily members from the village, who we activate to play an active role in planning, implementation, and monitoring of development programs at the school level. And this together leads towards retention of our children and especially our out of school girls. And a majority of our children are primarily first generation learners. And to bridge this gap, it was imperative that we provide foundational skills in both literacy and numeracy for all children. And we do that through our educational girls curriculum called Gyan Ka Pitara. Next slide, please. The organization, while pursuing educational outcomes, is rooted in mindset and behavior change en masse across thousands of villages. And through the support of EAC, we've been able to replicate our work across 3 states in India and 18,000 villages, mobilizing and engaging over 1,700 staff and 13,000 community-based volunteers. It is this approach to community engagement that has sort of catapulted our reach to over 750,000 out-of-school girls being enrolled and improved learning outcomes of over 1.3 million children. And as we focus on our audacious goal of reaching 1.5 million out-of-school girls by 2024, it is this partnership with EAC, which would have then spanned a decade, that has been instrumental in providing us the platform to be able to have this sort of impact. Next slide, please. And as I sit here today, I know each of us have experienced COVID-19 in different ways, in our homes, in our communities, in our countries. And things continue to evolve, and these are unprecedented times, which none of us have ever witnessed. And if I draw parallels from what we've seen during and post Ebola, almost a third of girls couldn't return back to school. And we've seen the same with the refugee crisis in Syria that was hitting the girls the hardest. And it's the same here in India. And as we go to reopen communities and schools, we have to stay agile. And it is important for us to be able to do that because of the massive exposure we have on the ground. And in India, we've been in a nationwide lockdown since March 24th of this year, seeing 1.3 billion people come to a standstill. And I want to take a couple of minutes to share some observations that we've seen from our work with the communities. Now, during the past 12 years, we've seen poverty and patriarchy continue as the 2 key barriers to girls' education. And now with COVID-19, these challenges have further exacerbated the problem. And the economic shock due to job losses and reverse migration has further plunged families into poverty. Alongside these economic factors that are crippling our communities, there is an emerging regression to all gendered roles in households. We're seeing 17 times the increase in domestic abuse cases. India's emergency child helpline has received over 90,000 SOS calls within the first 11 days of our lockdown. And distress calls to the National Commission for Women helpline has doubled. And with patriarchy back at play, the vulnerability of our girls is even higher. And for us to respond with agility is even more vital. Our community-based volunteers and our collaboration with the local government has helped to amplify that outreach. And despite the lockdown and limited to zero mobility, we were able to reach out to over 97,000 households and 480,000 individuals spread across 3 states. Next slide, please. I wanted to share a few pictures from some of the outreach work that we've done. And I recall one of my district managers from Madhya Pradesh sending me a teeny tiny video of all of them on a boat with these massive bags of ration kits that they were sending out to the most remote villages. And we had to be innovative and respond to whatever was happening on the ground. And it was a testament to the dedication of our team that we were able to do this kind of outreach. Next slide, please. And while providing food and ration and hygiene kits was important, we, next slide, please. We had to ensure that we were also sharing knowledge, not just on safety advice, but very critical social protection schemes that would allow our families to access much needed support. And it wasn't just about dissemination of information that we did through WhatsApp and SMS, but also provided them to the support to apply to these schemes. Next slide, please. In the midst of a lockdown, for us to reach out to about 97,000 households, we needed to respond with a local solution, sort of like a bottom-up approach. And we consciously decided to pivot from our education focus to a humanitarian response. And at the onset, it was imperative for us to address the shortage of food and alleviate hunger. And the pictures that you saw previously don't highlight, while they do highlight the distribution of relief kits, it does not capture the sheer grit and determination and innovation it took our field teams and our team Balika of the 13,000 strong force of them to ensure that our communities were able to access much needed food and hygiene kits, and the local government to acknowledge our work in supporting the most vulnerable families. And our next step was to address sort of the long-term impact of COVID-19 and ensure we have a hyper-local focus. To do that, we needed a team that was equipped. So the first thing we did was provided data packs to our field teams, and of which about 50% of the team Balikas had smartphones. This is India, where we have a smartphone penetration of about 2%. And this ensured that they got trained online and were ready to reach out to communities and were able to provide information on safety measures, acting as that last mile connect by facilitating distance learning through government learning apps on their smartphones, advocating for girls' safety and resources that they could access. And while all of this push was being made towards online education, we had to continue to advocate for a more inclusive approach, especially for the villages and communities that we worked in that did not have access to technology. So for example, in Madhya Pradesh, we supported the government in distribution of books that now is enabling local learning hubs at the village level. Next slide, please. And as we move forward, we really wanted to think about what our future goals look like. And Educate Girls was named as an audacious project in 2019, and we aim to reach 35,000 villages and reach over 1.5 million out-of-school girls by then. But none of that is possible if we continue to stay with the similar model that we have right now. And with the onset of COVID, we had to reimagine what girls' education looked like. And our priority remains first generation learners and ensure that they have access either to school or learning. And with a mass exodus of migrants from urban back to rural India and to their villages and homes, we're working closely to ensure that no child, especially a girl child, is left behind. And we have to revisit and redesign our outreach to ensure we have a blended learning approach, which will help us stay agile and responsive to our community needs. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. I am Lisa Rodrigues, and I educate girls.
Thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful summary of what Educate Girls does in general, but especially how You've responded to this unprecedented time that we are in fact living in. And I think it's really important, some of the things that you touched on, including the fact that we're not necessarily, we know a lot about how to respond in emergencies and what takes place, and that we can draw on the lessons from other emergencies such as the Ebola crisis and responses that organizations had and that were put in place to bring children back to school and to help ensure continuity of learning during the school closures from the Ebola crisis. The necessity to stay agile, I think, is extremely important. And again, you've really touched on the fact that in times of emergency, it is the most marginalized and those who are the most disenfranchised who suffer the most, and that we need to really pay attention to those populations to ensure that not only are resources available to them and the attention is paid, but they also are ensured the learning opportunities that they deserve and have a right to. With that, I'm going to ask our partner in UNICEF, UNICEF in Nigeria, Representative Chikande, to come on and talk to us about how UNICEF has really adapted their approach to working with the communities during this time. Thank you, Chikande.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you listening. UNICEF and Educated Child are in partnership to bring out-of-school children in Nigeria back to school. And this program is running in 4 states of Nigeria, which are Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. And in these communities, we are ensuring that we are bringing the children from that are out of school into schools. Next slide. Now we have COVID-19, which has impacted learning and disrupted learning for most of these learners. Just a snapshot of who has been impacted: about 7 million junior secondary school learners have been impacted. Their learning has been disrupted by the school closures, and 28 million primary school learners have also been disrupted in their learning, and 7 million pre-primary learners have been disrupted. It is not only the learning that has been disrupted by the closure of the schools, but it is also other broader essential services that have been brought at risk for the learners. For example, learners cannot access easily the school feeding programs, which were supporting them while they were in school. The information about disease prevention, water sanitation, and health services. But to crown it all, the communities are taking the burden of care and looking after the children. Now, in next slide, please. We're looking at the strategies for adaptation and flexibility strategies that UNICEF and the Educated Child in partnership have developed. And we have been able to respond in different ways, but the most important ones are to respond by having a response plan for COVID-19. We work with state governments as well as other partners to respond to COVID-19. We also discussed reprogramming or repurposing of the funds that were otherwise available while schools were open to be available for remote or home-based learning, and also worked with communities on how they would be able to support learning that the schools are learning. We are still under way of understanding how to monitor some of these programs. Next slide. Now, we looked at how we would engage with communities. As part of the program, we have been looking at engagement of communities, and we have specific designed strategies that we use as part of our community engagement. These strategies are enrollment drive, which is campaigns that push children to be enrolled in schools and to be retained in schools. We hold town hall meetings, even meet household heads to discuss the importance of enrolling children in schools. We also have developed entertainment for them, but at the same time educating them about the importance of and relevance of education. We also work with mothers associations, building their capacities on understanding how they can do good parenting as well as household care for their learners at home. Finally, our engagement is also with the wider communities, the girls themselves, boys, as well as working with the male champions to provide solidarity for girls' education. So we build their skills in order for these girls and boys to enroll, but also be retained in schools. Now, all these strategies have brought us to a situation now that the schools are closed, and the alternative is to work from home, to learn from home. Schools can be closed, the four walls of a classroom can be closed, but learning must not stop. So we developed home-based learning strategies. This will ensure that all learners are accessing learning through remote means and ways, but also at the same time they have access to resources. And even these resources could be textbook, workbooks, and some of them through deliveries at home. So far, we have been able to work with about 4.9 million learners that have been accessing learning through radios and television. We have also been able to deliver over 1,500 radios to communities of learners that are not able to access radios. Next slide. Now, communities have a role to play in the home-based learning, and the roles of communities are wide. They range from ensuring there is creation of a conducive learning environment to ensuring that the learners are able to follow a timetable on the TV or radio, ensuring that there is a safeguarding of the girls from abuse while they are at home, and also looking at reviewing lessons and monitoring the lessons that the learners are learning periodically. We are also of very importance, we are also working with the communities to plan on how to get back to school, because we have learned from Ebola experience that learners were not able to get back to school even when the schools were reopened. So we have mobilized communities on how they can plan for coming back to school. Next slide. At this point, I would like to thank everyone for your attention and understanding, and we am available for questions. My name is Chikondi Mpokosa. I'm based in Nigeria, Abuja. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikande. I'll ask you to just go ahead and stay on. And if the rest of our panelists can also join us by turning their video and microphones on. Chikande, thank you so much for that, and really talking about the importance of repurposing funds, not only the funds, but also looking at your programming to see how things can be readapted to the current situation. And I think you made a very, very important point that learning does not only take place within the four walls of the school building. I think it's vital that we remember that. At this time, I do want to point out that our technicians, Ryan has shared some handouts for you that are available on your panel, your control panels. If you would like, there's some additional information from Educate Girls, as well as a slightly more detailed presentation that from UNICEF. So now we're moving into our discussion part. So I would like to ask you all, what have been the advantages, or what do you see as the importance of including the wider community beyond the immediate family unit in the education of the children that you work with, in general in your work, but also as you have had to adapt the work to address the school closures and getting children back to school as schools start to reopen in a safe and healthy way?
And thank you very much, Lisa. I will start. I think communities are forming part of parcel of the day-to-day life of the children, the learners. Learners are in the communities apart from just being in households. And the engagement of a wider community helps to be the keepers and supporters. We've talked about increase in abuse, for example. It is the wider community that would safeguard, support the learners to be able not to be abused while they are at home 24/7, but also looking at some of the work that we have seen. It is the communities that will ensure the schools are safe enough for the return of the learners. And the change in attitude, their understanding that COVID-19 ways of mitigating or prevention of it will encourage and motivate the learners to go back to school when the schools are open. So I think I will take it from there. I can pass it to buildOn, because I think they also talked about their experiences around Ebola.
Okay, thank you so much, Chikonde, for passing it over to us. I'll start asking this, and I think that's a really important question, and one that we have really made at the forefront of our work at buildOn since we were founded about 30 years ago. And we learned very early on in our first school construction process that we didn't have widespread community engagement in the project. And the project took a long time and the community wasn't bought in. And this is where our covenant was born. And so you probably have heard Jibril talk a little bit about the covenant in his introduction. But what we do in our site selection, in addition to working really closely with our government partners and the local Ministry of Education, is we have mass meetings in the community. So everybody comes, usually gathering under a tree, in order to learn about buildOn methodology, because we are different than a lot of other organizations who are working in the area. We don't hire contractors to build the school. Our community members provide all of the unskilled labor. So it's a really huge commitment of the community to work with us. And they have to be really eager and engaged in education. And it has to be everyone. It has to be the village chief who may not have children anymore in the school of his own. Or her own in some places. In Malawi, we have some women who are chiefs, but normally it's him, right, who is the chief and the leader of the community. And then, you know, when we gather all of the community members to sign the covenant, all of the women and all of the men who are adults have to sign on to the project. And then they all help to build the school. And on average, we have about 2,400 volunteer workdays on any school buildOn has made. And so, you know, in smaller communities, it's impossible for us to build a school with only the parents. So it has to extend beyond the family unit in order for us to do it. And then also, we want to ensure, I think Chikonde said it really well, like we want the community members to support and safeguard the school. So they need to take care of it after. Sometimes PTA members are not parents, but they need to be engaged. And if I am a woman living at my home and I know that my neighbor is not sending her children to school because she doesn't understand the importance of school, we really want all of the parents, through the signing of the covenant, to guarantee that they're going to bring all children back to school, regardless of caste or regardless of gender. And so we have found that it's crucial to have all of everybody involved in the school. And the last thing I'll say is our mission includes that we are breaking the cycle of low expectations. And that we have found too often that even community members will sometimes say, we are too poor, we can't do this, we can't partner with you. Or even, you know, sometimes local leaders will say that as well, or the Ministry of Education. But we have found that when we find really good ways for the communities to own their projects and contribute to their projects, the entire community, that the success of the project is even greater and sustainable. So thanks, Chikonde, for passing it to us. I'm going to pass one to you next.
Well, at least I see you nodding. So would you like to add to what Chikonde and Roseanne have so eloquently expressed?
I think we work in a similar ethos, Sabrina, where the minute we move into a community, our first mandate is to identify influencers. And that typically is retired teachers to village level or government in charge bodies, etc., so that they are able to identify and help partner with us to identify out of school girls. And that's a large premise for why our work sustains in a community even after we exit. And even during the entire learning cycle, we are looking at a massive mindset and behavior change here, and it doesn't happen overnight just because we walk into a community, draw a little a school painting and say, okay, everyone should come to school. But it really takes a village to get each and every girl into that school. And so we organize, similar to you, Roseanne, organize community level village meetings. So what we call mohalla meetings, and which are at the grassroots level. We work with the school management committee. So all of this has helped us stay true to the work and the educational outcome that we want to look at. But also, in light of COVID, we've been able to be as responsive as we've had because of that engagement and building that ecosystem of leadership right from the ground up. So that's sort of my viewpoint on that. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you for that. I think this is just really, really useful insights on the roles and the importance of community engagement across the board. And I like, Roseanne, what you pointed out about not underestimating what the communities can do and contribute. This is so true that just by bringing a little bit, everyone contributing a small, tiny amount, you can see entire schools being built just at the hands of a community, and so much more. Jabril, did you have anything that you would like to add to what your female colleagues, you're the lone man on this, so let's give you a voice today as well. Do you have anything at all you'd like to add to what they've already said?
Yeah, I want to add that also with this way of having community members all together in the project helps a lot to catalyze a stronger solidarity within the community. And as you know, at the international level, the cause of education requires solidarity globally. And I would say it's the same at the country level, but also at the community level. So having the community members working together and having a stronger solidarity within the community, it helps a lot for the education of children, because the education of a child will not depend only on his own parents, but on the broad community, which is a stronger entity than the isolated family.
Thank you for that addition. Chikonde, I think UNICEF would be proud the representation we have here. I know you try to get at least 50% girls enrolled through your projects, and we have exceeded that with our panelists today. So as a follow-up, I kind of want to ask you, could you please talk to, this is to all of you, what are the main challenges that you face in engaging communities to fulfill their role in the education sector, but also in ensuring education for the children in their villages or in their communities as a whole? And let's start it off with Jabril. Or anybody that would like to start. Jabril, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I would say one of the challenges is the situation in our country sometimes, like instability, like in Mali and Burkina, that have been affecting community members, or the natural disasters in Haiti, for example. But also there are some other challenges include the culture. So it takes time sometimes to really build awareness in the communities, and also particularly in the situations where we have extreme poverty that allows some other activities to be prioritized by community members on top of education. I'll give an example of gold mining, for example, in Burkina here. There are some regions where gold mining is being an emerging activity, and we see a lot of parents and children going to those mining sites, and a lot of children would just drop out of school because of that. So it takes more work and time to really sensitize community members, knowing that there is, the challenge with poverty, and make sure that they let the children back in school.
Yeah, I think I could also add, Sabrina, and my addition is that the challenges we have are around the value of education, the way the communities value education, and this comes on the background that some learners have completed the whole education system and they came out and they do not have the skills that they are expected to come out of the education system with. And then the communities question, what is the purpose of us sending our children to school? And then they come out and they are just the same as those that have not gone back, that have not gone to school. So ensuring that the education system that we are asking them to partake or participate in is of good enough quality to help them build the skills and the requisite skills, as well as the exit skills that they would need for them to be able to survive a life after the education system, helps us to mitigate the challenge of people questioning the value. And then the relevance of education is also put on question, where you have people that do have good qualifications and they cannot get an employment, they cannot get, in their life cannot improve, because even though they have the skills, the employment is not linked to the relevance, the education that they attained. So being able to convince the communities to understand the value and the relevance of the education that is being provided for their communities is a challenge that we face. And then the final thing is the attitude towards the learning of a girl child as well as the boy child. In other communities, they value learning for a boy child more than a girl child, because the girl child is going just to get married after all, and the boy is the one that they want to invest in. So these issues are very important, and we are keeping challenging, and that's why we have male champions in the communities, that will have solidarity to work with the girls so that they can be educated. And then we also have the girls that will support girls for girls, to support each other, to say, yes, we can do it, we can have an education, and the education should is going to benefit us. Then finally, working on the education system itself, so that you will have a system that is of good quality. And of course, that means having quality teachers that will deliver pedagogy for the learners, or deliver lessons for the learners to be effective. So all these things are challenges, but they are working around the system simply, and in a nimble way. You will see that they are not going to make it easy for the work to engage communities. Thank you. I will pass it on to you, Sabrina.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for passing it back to me. I was actually going to ask Lisa if they have any particular challenges in getting communities to engage and support the education of the children in their areas. I know you work in some very remote and very disadvantaged parts of India.
We work in some of the most remote and areas in India, and I recall going with one of my teen balikas to one of the homes where 2 out of 3 children were going to school, and we couldn't figure out why one of the child would not be sent to school. And we went and spoke to parents, and they were so gracious, had us sit there, and they're talking to complete strangers. I've never met them in my life, and I was embarrassed to ask them, but I just wanted them to share their story. And they tell me that, well, we need people in the field, and I need her to help me in the field, and that's the reality of my life. And you go away humbled because you have to recognize the constraints family has, and then work within that system and understand, okay, how can I bring learning to that household, to that child who's left behind. So that's one sort of form of the challenge we face. The second is just rooted patriarchy in India, and that's embedded in the value system and the culture and tradition that we see ongoing. And that mindset change and that shift will only happen when we actually build leaders in the community, which is why when we have teen balikas who are women who are pursuing their masters, who have completed their education, it's so empowering to have those kind of role models in the community. Another challenge that we face is just the remoteness of schools. So because, say, for example, in one district alone, it could sometimes take you 5 hours to span the one district. And so you can imagine the effort it takes for a child to even get to school. And when you get to school, it's the quality of education and the teaching. So which is why then we need to supplement that with remedial learning. So there are multiple challenges that happen, and then advocating for the out of school girl children with the government, because the government does their own survey, and then sometimes there's disagreement in terms of the number of out of school girls that we've identified, which they don't necessarily want to buy into. So you're fighting sort of this whole lens of we need to make our communities look good, and engaging and ensuring buy-in with the government, ensuring buy-in with the community, and then actually getting our work done. So there are loads of challenges, but we have a fantastic team and who stays innovative despite all of these challenges.
Yeah.
I want to ask you some more about the Team Balika, but we have a question from the audience from Ahmad Saeed. He says, first of all, hi, but I was just wondering what kind of awareness is being raised, if any, as there is a rise in abuse and violence worldwide. Both Lisa and Chikanda, you've touched on the fact that there are increases in violence against the children and the women in the areas that you're working on. So he wants to know what awareness is being raised, and how are children, and particular girls, safeguarded from abuse such as FGM and other types of gender-based violence. And what I would add to that, what role have you advocated, or does the community as a larger whole play in protecting children from this increase in violence that we've been seeing and abuse?
Yeah, shall I give it a go, and then I'll pass to you, Lisa, or? Yeah.
Go ahead.
And Roseanne and Jibril as well, please feel free to jump in and answer this, as I'm sure that you've seen things as well.
Yes, and I agree to the fact that in Nigeria and in many countries, the domestic abuse has gone high, and it has risen during this COVID-19, especially in the lockdown. And this is both physical, emotional, sexual, and financial. Every type of abuse has been on the rise as a result of these lockdowns that we've been in. Now, because of that, we have been working with the school-based management committees. We have also been working with mothers associations, and we have been working with the state governments, local government education authorities, sensitizing them on the issues that could happen to children while on lockdown. So we have sensitized them on what could happen, how they should be able to notice it within the communities, because when the children go to school, the teachers can notice children that are vulnerable in the classroom. But now the classrooms are no longer holding. So this should be identified within the communities. So the school-based management committees, the mothers associations, the champions for he for she, male champions, as well as the girls for girls, they are working in collaboration within the communities where they are in, and understanding the impact and the issues that are facing girls and as well as boys. And this has helped us to bring support to them, and also work with our child protection colleagues to ensure that the abuses are reported, and also the victims are supported and the perpetrators are brought to book. And with that system, it is working. But we must know that the impact of abuse is going to be long lasting. So we're working on psychosocial support to the learners, psychosocial support to the communities, that they should be able to talk about it and see how they can be supported. And that's one of the ways that we have been able to ensure that the communities that we are serving are being protected. Just for the statistics, we have it on record. We know that during Ebola, about 11,000 girls never returned to school because they were pregnant after the Ebola in Sierra Leone. So we know that these things are going to be happening, and that's why we would be preempting them by putting out systems where people are able to report. Over to you, Lisa, then.
Thank you. I think primarily how we look at child protection and how we look at engaging our communities is, first, we have everyone on the team trained in a child protection policy, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're full-time staff. When it comes to actually advocating for our girl child and their protection in the community, the first is we identify cases. It depends if our team Balika has found a case like that, and we lean on our peers and our network to provide resources and support, either through the government or other nonprofits. Our main focus is to draw awareness to child rights and women's rights. So as we advocate for safety during COVID and what awareness looks like and what social protection schemes are available, we also do focus on this aspect, not so much directly, but definitely as part of our outreach work. Thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you for that. I think this is so important, the role that the communities can play in ensuring that children are protected and that there's awareness around how to identify the abuses that happen, and particularly the role that schools can play in helping, and the wider education community can help and play in that protection role as well. Each of you have kind of talked a little bit about the effects of the pandemic on reverse migration, children moving out, employment, poverty. We've seen this worldwide as people are losing their jobs, and it's having a greater and greater effect. We know that one of the main barriers to education and reasons for children being out of school is poverty, and a driver to that is the children's need to work. So could you maybe talk a little bit about how you are engaging the community members and to immobilize children so that they will return to schools or to learning opportunities, as opposed to needing to maybe stay, like Jibril, you talked about the children in the mines in Burkina Faso, or even the children who have to farm to help their families out to raise a little additional income into the family to feed each other. How do we work with communities so that to address this issue of the need for children to help support their families and the driver of keeping the children, that driver that keeps children out of school? Thank you.
I'm happy to take this one first. I don't think I took the question first yet. This is definitely a great question. You know, I just want to start off with the related issue that you brought up first about the reverse migration. And just to call attention to another example that buildOn worked with in 2010, I think most of us know there was a huge earthquake in Haiti. And as a result, there was huge migration from the city of Port-au-Prince out into the communities. And at that time, we saw a huge increase in the number of children, of course, that were going to be going to school. Many of them were out of school for a period of time, but there was a huge influx in the people who went out to the countryside. And that's where buildOn is working in those remote places, just like Lisa talked about. So what we found there is that there was really a need to do increased sensitization because there were all these newcomers to the community and they didn't necessarily have the relationship with buildOn, or they didn't really even have the relationship with people in their community. So we saw the expansion of communities, which started to change some of the dynamics in the community with so many newcomers who maybe had come just for, you know, their school break vacation, but didn't spend a lot of time there. So there was a huge need to build more schools, and there were also more parents who were willing to do it because they were used to different higher quality school structures in the city than they had in the countryside. So in that way, there was definitely increased demand and people had higher expectations for education. But moving on to a little bit more about your question, definitely, it's very easy to say, like, you know, like Lisa said, you know, all of your children should be at school. Why is one not in school? But there are definitely reasons for all of them. And I think really, I think Lisa also said the word humble, being really humble and allowing, you know, ensuring that your staff, whether they are male or female staff, understand what the issues are in the community and work with the community members and the leaders to find the solutions. Because if our goal, you know, we enrolled more than 55,000 out of school children in partnership with EAC. But if we determined that we knew the solutions for that and we would bring the solutions, whether I'm from Burkina Faso or from the United States, living in Ouagadougou, there's no way that we could do it. So working with the community members, being humble and understanding that they bring so much to, that they are the ones who are going to determine what the issues are and what the solution should be. So we found that to be really extremely important. And one of the ways where it's been really exciting for us is working with our leadership committees. So we have leadership committees that will guide the project, the construction project, from the beginning to the end. But those leadership committees also exist within our Enroll program, and that's what we call our out-of-school child program. We call it Enroll, and we have a leadership committee that forms in many of our communities, and they decide what they want to do to help bring kids back to school. And so, for example, in Senegal, we have the women who are also part of our adult literacy program, but that's too long of a story, I think. But they decided that what they found is because they're best suited to figure out what the issues are, like I said. And so what they found was when school started in Senegal, many of the children were not coming back to school, or they were coming back to school without the school supplies that they needed. And they knew that the start of the school year, the harvest finished after the start of the school year. So parents needed their children to finish the harvest, but they also didn't have the money to send them to school, which could be like just buying soap. You know, we don't think about that, right? Sometimes some of us don't think about it. Buying soap or the school supplies. And so those women from that leadership committee got together and they created a school store in their village. And they sold the things for a little bit higher than they purchased them for, but it was still cheaper than they could get by going into town. And then they don't have to pay the transport to go into town. And they established a system of credit for people in the community that they could get the school supplies for their children so that the children could start school on time. And it was a very, very low interest rate. Now, if Jabril or I were talking about this community and coming up with solutions, we would have never come up with that solution to have those women do that. And I walked into that village and into the school, and I was shocked at first because oftentimes when we go into our schools, I'm sure it's similar for Chikonde and Lisa as well, that sometimes the students don't have the books or the notebooks or the pens or other materials. And I was so impressed, like the children all had colored pencils and paper and notebooks, and they were all so engaged and proud to be in that classroom. And why did that happen? Because the women determined what the solutions were, and they made that solution in Senegal. So as we're talking about all of these challenges in children working, it's really important just to use, I think, Lisa and Chikonde, I think, said to be humble and to be nimble and to take a step back and let people lead. Because if I can give a solution that may work for a week or a month or maybe even a school year, but that's going to be extremely limited. But those women in Senegal have a system that they can do every year. And then the money that they make from the store too, they're investing back right into the school for school supplies that the teachers need. So if we can be humble and get out of the way, real change can happen.
I could also add, Rosam, my addition would be ensuring that the work, for example, that we do for identifying the households that are vulnerable or the households that hold children that are at most risk of not returning to school or of not continuing their learning. So the work that we do here in Nigeria within these 4 states is to meticulously identify, map every household within a community, within a local government authority that has a child or children that are at risk of failing to go to school. And these are supported with a lot of services, and one of them that we have discovered is working very well is cash transfer. So for a home that has 4 children, that they are wanting these children to support their work in the farm in order for them to progress with their farming. Now, if we ask this family to say, take all these 4 children to school, the household heads will tell you, no, what will happen to my farm? Now, for us to say, okay, we will be able to give cash transfer, which is not conditional, but you will be able to do all the other things that you're supposed to do, minus the children will be in school. And this program has helped us to see over 500,000 learners to get back to school. And we are working with them to ensure that they return and they gain the schools. Now, the other aspect is ensuring that where we are sending them is of good quality. This is a good, conducive environment. So we work with the school improvement grants, ensure that they have toilets, they have running water, they have workbooks, they have teachers who have skill to support them in their learning. So these work together. We would be going to and from. Now, the situation has changed. None of us anticipated that the schools will be brought to a standstill the way they have done. And we know that this has changed the terrain and it has changed the discourse within the education sector. And we are working the materials that we were able to produce while the learners are in school have been adapted to ensure that learning is going to continue. And what we have already planned is that those learners that will go back to school and may have lost track of their learning will get remedial. They will get teaching at the right level for them to move quickly to catch up. And the learners that may never get to school will still be able to get some learning for them to get some skills. And we should be frank here, the education system will never be the same after this COVID-19. And for us, it's how we are going to use this opportunity to adapt and ensure that we are leaving no learner behind.
Thank you so much for that. Lisa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to provide some context from an India standpoint. And I think in the last 25 years, our economy was liberated and we saw sort of this massive rural to urban migration for jobs and for a better life. And a large part of that was the men and the boys that moved. And with the COVID situation and with this lockdown, and because of loss of jobs, we've seen a mass exodus back from urban to rural locations. So what has that then brought on in our communities? And I wanted to give an example of a young girl that we had recently brought back to school. She's 18 years old, and they have one mobile phone in their household. And her brother had returned from, I think, Mumbai or Delhi, I can't recall. And he was very unsettled with how comfortable his sister was with the mobile phone and thought it was an acceptable behavior of a girl. And they soon got her married off. And it is so frustrating in a situation where you worked so hard to bring someone back to school, where you see sort of this patriarchal mindset move back in and force girls into a system they don't want to be part of, or don't even have a voice to say, I don't want to be part of this. And that's really the reality at a household level. And then some of the challenges that we're seeing with the reverse migration is identifying, similar to what Chikanda said, is identifying who really is out of school and what's happening, what does the shift and the demographic change because of this reverse migration. And so we're working with the government. They have teachers deployed for the last 15 days who've been going literally door to door to map out all of the kids in the household. And then been also partnering with the government where they're using digital learning apps that are provided by the government. So we have our volunteers on the teeny tiny smartphone, and you have 5 kids practicing social distancing with their masks and their little notebooks and a little mobile phone, and they're learning. And we had to adapt, and we had to say, okay, we moved from teaching at school to now teaching in the community. And as we move forward, we're unsure about how schools, what academic sessions would even look like. So we're now trying to sort of look at a blended approach of, okay, online and offline approach, but also look at community-based learning and how can we advocate for our teen Balikas to bring that learning to the household. So that's sort of our perspective from India.
Thank you for that. I think there's just such a wealth of knowledge and takeaways and experience. Roseanne, I think you summed up something that really we have to take away from this entire discussion, and that is I think the most important role of communities is the solutions. Those community-driven solutions, and being humble enough to know that we don't have all the answers. That true change comes from the community itself. And so many of you touched on things such as the child support and male champions and the volunteers that come out of the community that are driving this change. If we can take nothing else away, I think that we have to remember that, as outsiders, we don't know it all, and those community-driven solutions are the ones that are going to be sustainable throughout. I want to go to our audience before I ask you any more questions. I know we have a few questions from the audience. I think we have let's see, Mr. Hamza, who has a question that he would like to ask. Do you want to ask that orally, Mr. Hamza, or would you like me to read your question? Ryan, if you want to unmute him, maybe.
Put his hand down, and now
okay.
I can't find him.
Okay, well then I will read his question for him. So he says that please, how can we protect and end the female Amarji child? The Amarji system is terrific now. I have conducted research to see how we work to address this menace with support of partners and engagement of other strong stakeholders.
Yes, Amarji, these children that have been with imams in integrated Quranic schools or Islamia schools, and in Nigeria, we have during this pandemic, we have seen different state governments delivering Almajiri children to their homes of origin. So some of them the number of out of school children increases by the inclusion of the Amarjiris that normally attend the Quranic schools that are not formal, but they are non-formal. So his question there is looking at the female Almajiris there. And I think that's what he is referring to without.
Yes.
Now,
okay. So I know these are the Taliban in Senegal and in some other parts of Africa as well. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the whole point is most of them are out of school. And working with them to ensure that they have a right to education. And this support that we are offering to integrated Quranic schools, or which will help them transit to formal schooling, is one of the support that they would get. So we should work with the girls that are Marjories, ensure that they are enrolled in a school that they will then be supported. So the same process of identifying which household they are in, where are they, mapping out where they are all, and then being able to work with the encouraging, motivating them to gain the schools, help them catch up where they have lost some skills, help them to get the bridging up skills or transitional skills that will help them do well in a formal setting of schooling is one of the ways that we'll be able to help them. And with this home-based learning and working with them to have the materials that we workbooks that other learners access is also an important way of us supporting them. So the support that we are working with in the states, the 4 states with the partnership with Educated Child, is also going to be looking at how we will be supporting them as we map them as out-of-school children.
Thank you for that contribution. I know some of our other projects in Mali and elsewhere are also working with integrating Quranic schools into the formal school system and trying to really ensure that the formal education curriculum is being offered alongside that traditional religious education so that parents don't have to make the choice of one or the other. That they can have both, and that the children can benefit from getting both the traditional education as well as the formal primary school education. But I think it's really important what you touched on about how this has affected the COVID-19 situation of children being sent home has had an impact on these integrated schools, Quranic schools, and how UNICEF in Nigeria is approaching the home-based learning to ensure that those children also continue their learning, their formal learning. And did any of you others want to address that question or have similar situations that you have looked at and deal with? So if not, Ryan, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, actually, Tim Harworth just asked, may I ask a question to the panel about how different organizations are promoting staff welfare and supporting our colleagues and teachers through COVID-19 so they stay positive through these challenging times? Thanks, Tim.
Yes, thank you very much, Tim. Very important question. We have been working on provide psychosocial support to the teachers in the areas that we are working with, ensuring that teachers are able to talk to each other, and also ensuring that they are relating back to their education secretaries, who are the heads of education at the local government authorities. Some of these teachers are the ones that have been involved in the adaptation of their learning from the materials to ensure that the materials are ready, audio ready, as well as television ready. So we have been working with the teachers in the studios to record these lessons, to work through all the content that they would normally deliver in a classroom, and they would be delivering it by radio. So education secretaries have been working with the teachers within their area or constituency to ensure that they are engaged in learning in one way or the other. So in that way, the teachers are not just left out in the cold, but they are still we are still ensuring that they are going to still get motivated to ensure that their learners are learning. The final thing that we are also engaging them around is the returning to schools. So when the COVID-19 pandemic effects are mitigated and then the schools are going to be opened, we are engaging with the teachers as well as the school-based management committees to look at what are the safety procedures that we need to get across, and how are they going to work with the learners, ensuring they are not going to be infected and the learners are not going to be infected. Recently, we have just been able to produce the guideline for school reopening, which the Minister of Education here has been able to launch. And in that, it has provided several guidance for how the schools will reopen. The schools are not opening yet, but we are preparing for that situation, and also preparing the teachers that they are also feeling they are safe enough and motivated to do their job, their roles as teachers. In a wider perspective, these are mainly the government or state teachers. These are not private. So these are, we are working with public schools as it is. So this is where all this work is coming from. And finally, we have been able to we are in discussion on how we can digitalize teacher professional development. So putting the materials, the same materials that we have, but also ensuring that they are digitalized and they are able to, we have a system. So this is under discussion, and we will be able to look at that. But we know that for everything, for a quality of an education system, it cannot exceed the quality of its teachers.
Thank you for that. That's a very thorough response to how UNICEF is addressing this issue or that question. Thank you so much. I would just like to ask all of you if you have any final thoughts or questions or reflections on the topic and on how going forward our education and our approaches may change due to the lessons that we've learned from the adaptations and the need to change given the current situation with COVID-19. Any final reflections or thoughts?
I think I'll go first.
Okay.
Starting with the potential long-term effect of COVID-19 and what we can do for that. I know right now with the situation, distance learning is a great addition and a great alternative for the education of the children. But at the same time, classrooms will be needed, and we'll probably need more classrooms for children in the future. Because in most of our rural communities, people even don't have access to the facilities, the connectivity, and even electricity in some places. So it's really hard to access to distance learning for them. So they will have to go to the classrooms to learn, and as far as we'll have to observe social distancing in the classrooms, then we need to build more classrooms for communities and students to reduce the people by classroom ratio, so we can observe social distancing in the classrooms. And lastly, I would say that we really need to, like most of you said, let the community lead the initiatives and avoid having low expectations for them, because poverty can be a good excuse sometimes, just to think that we need to bring everything to the community members, but ensuring that they contribute and that they really provide what they can for the education of the children is a long-term way to ensure education for our school children and all children in general.
Any other reflections? Lisa?
Yeah, I really love what Roseanne and Jibril both shared about drawing really from the community, and that's going to be our focus moving forward, not just to understand the current barriers that our communities face, but how do they see solutions. And I think that's an integral approach to how we move forward in the next few months. And as we do that, also equipping our teams with the right support. So I remember talking to my district managers, and they're saying, hey, we usually make an annual plan and we execute it, but this plan is changing week on week, and just being aware of the pressure that your team faces and providing a space for them to share what they need, and the ability as a leader to ask the right questions so that they feel supported. And I think those are the two key things that I would love to share with the rest of the audience and the fantastic panel here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, Chikande, please.
Thank you. I think for us, we understand that COVID-19 has changed the education sector, the way it functions, and it is an opportunity for us to rebuild better, ensure that we are able to use the digital media and the digital technology for learning. And I know that some quarters find it difficult to understand how we can have effective learning through digital media and the platforms. And this is one of the things that we should be reflecting on. We cannot reach all learners with digital media, and that is a fact. And we should be looking at also these home deliveries and how we would reach at least the 20 or 30% of the learners that we would not be able to reach through the digital media or home-based remote learning. The opportunity for the education sector is now to use, adapt, and be flexible, that another global pandemic, which we are not predicting, should not meet in a situation where we will have to be running to see what can we do. So these are the kind of reflections that I have. I'm thinking about, okay, we have the repository of all these materials that we have been using, but they were in hard copy. So we were now adapting, making them audio, visual, and all this kind of work. It's very important. But then we should be able to use this momentum to build better and move forward. Secondly, the learners and the communities, and we need to continually work with them because most of them are rural and remote. Illiteracy is high. For them to understand all these changes that we are undertaking, we might be leaving some of these communities behind. And it is my reflection all the time to think, how are we keep going to keep them abreast with all these changes that are happening very fast? And how are we going to sustain the work? It is the sustainability of this work that is also always coming to mind and to fore. Finally, how do we keep on strategizing? The models are focusing on specific locations and all that, but COVID-19 has hit everybody, and everybody is now, or every learner is at risk. So how are we going to work with the resources limited? When we work with the strategy, we work with limited resources. So these thoughts are coming to mind, and looking at how we move forward and ways forward. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for having us, and thank you for very intelligent questions and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikande. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm cognizant that we are a minute over time. So for our attendees, if any of you need to leave, thank you for attending and for addressing this. But I do want to make sure that Roseanne has an opportunity to offer any reflections that she has as well on this work in general going forward. So Roseanne, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be super fast because my colleagues here have said everything and very well, but I want us all to be thoughtful as we move forward, that we are nimble and we think of different solutions. And I think, Chikonde was challenging, like, meeting people digitally. And I know that my first response to that is, well, our communities are so remote and so rural, but I think we need to step away from some of those reactions that we sometimes say, like, oh, well, that won't work here or that won't work there. And that's my expectations for the community members that we partner with too, because they may say, like, oh, we can't build that school because we don't have access to sand in our community, and that's a requirement for you. And we challenge them to think out of the box all the time, and to push themselves and raise the expectations. So I think that all of us in the development committee, we also need to raise the expectations of ourselves. And there may be some things that we can do the same that we always have, but I think we need to question the way that we're doing the work, why we're doing the work, and how we can do it better and be in service to our communities.
Thank you so much. I think as we wrap up, I think some of the main takeaways that I'm taking from this are the absolute need for flexible solution, flexibility, agileness, raising expectations, thinking out of the box, and community-driven solutions, as well as being humble about the work that we do and who we are. I would like to draw attention for the audience and for the participants. Thank you again for participating in this. The handouts are available. They will also be posted to our website in the next day or so, along with a recording of the webinar session and the presentations. Our next webinar in this series will be taking place in August, and it will be Keep Children Learning in the Role of Parents. So thank you again to our panelists. It's an honor to work with all of you, and I'm so pleased that you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.